Kim Jong-un was born into a world of privilege and secrecy. As the youngest son of Kim Jong-il, the leader of North Korea, and his third wife, Ko Yong-hui, Jong-un grew up in the shadow of his family's immense power. From a young age, he was taught that his destiny was tied to the fate of his nation. His father, a strict and enigmatic man, often reminded him, "The mountain does not bow to the wind, and neither shall we." Jong-un's childhood was unlike that of most children. He attended elite schools, first in North Korea and later in Switzerland, where he lived under a false name to protect his identity. In Switzerland, he experienced a taste of freedom, playing basketball and enjoying Western movies. But even there, he could not escape the weight of his family's legacy. His minders, loyal to the regime, ensured he never strayed too far from the path set for him. When Jong-un returned to North Korea, his father began preparing him for leadership. The country was isolated, its people struggling under the weight of sanctions and a crumbling economy. Yet, the regime maintained its grip on power through propaganda, fear, and loyalty to the Kim family. Jong-un learned the art of politics, the importance of military strength, and the necessity of maintaining absolute control. In 2011, Kim Jong-il passed away suddenly, leaving a void at the top of the regime. Jong-un, still in his late 20s, was thrust into the role of supreme leader. Many doubted his ability to lead. He was young, inexperienced, and untested, but Jong-un was determined to prove himself. His early years as leader were marked by bold moves. He purged those he saw as threats, including his own uncle, Jang Song-thaek, who was accused of treason and executed. Jong-un sought to consolidate his power, ensuring that no one could challenge his authority. At the same time, he began to modernize North Korea's military, investing in nuclear weapons and missile technology. He believed that only through strength could his nation survive in a hostile world. Despite his harsh tactics, Jong-un also sought to improve the lives of his people, or at least to create the illusion of progress. He oversaw the construction of new buildings in Pyongyang, the capital, and promoted science and technology as keys to the nation's future. He even allowed limited economic reforms, though they were tightly controlled by the state. But life in North Korea remained difficult for most. The country's resources were funneled into the military and the elite, while ordinary citizens faced food shortages and strict surveillance. Jong-un's regime maintained its grip through a combination of propaganda and repression. The state-controlled media portrayed him as a benevolent leader, a man of the people who worked tirelessly for their benefit. In reality, his rule was absolute, and dissent was met with swift and brutal punishment. On the international stage, Jong-un became a controversial figure. His pursuit of nuclear weapons brought him into conflict with the United States and other world powers. He engaged in a war of words with U.S. President Donald Trump, trading insults and threats. Yet, in a surprising turn of events, the two leaders met in 2018 for a historic summit in Singapore. It was the first time a sitting U.S. president had met with a North Korean leader. The meeting raised hopes for peace, but little concrete progress was made. Through it all, Jong-un remained a figure of mystery. To the outside world, he was a dictator, a man who ruled with an iron fist. To his people, he was the supreme leader, a figure of almost divine authority. And to himself? Perhaps he was a man burdened by the weight of his family's legacy, determined to prove himself worthy of the mountain he had inherited, the weight of the crown. As the years went by, Kim Jong-un's rule became more entrenched, but the challenges he faced only grew. The international community continued to impose harsh sanctions on North Korea, aiming to pressure the regime into abandoning its nuclear program. The sanctions hit the economy hard, making it difficult for the country to import essential goods, like fuel and medicine. Yet, Jong-un refused to back down. To him, nuclear weapons were not just a symbol of power, they were the key to survival. He often repeated his father's words, "A nation without a strong military is a nation without a future." Despite the economic hardships, Jong-un worked to maintain the loyalty of his people. He understood the power of propaganda and used it skillfully. State media portrayed him as a visionary leader, a man who could guide North Korea to greatness. Images of him visiting factories, farms, and military bases were broadcast across the country. He was shown smiling with children, inspecting new construction projects, and even driving a tank during military exercises. These carefully crafted images were designed to inspire loyalty and hope, but behind the scenes, life in North Korea was far from perfect. The gap between the elite in Pyongyang and the rest of the population grew wider. While the privileged few enjoyed access to luxury goods and modern amenities, many ordinary citizens struggled to make ends meet. Food shortages were common, and the black market became a lifeline for many. Jong-un knew about these issues, but he believed that maintaining control was more important than addressing every hardship. "A tree cannot grow without strong roots," he often said, referring to the need for a stable and unchallenged leadership. One of Jong-un's most significant challenges was managing relationships with other countries. China, North Korea's closest ally, provided crucial support, but even they grew frustrated with his refusal to denuclearize. South Korea, meanwhile, oscillated between hope and skepticism. There were moments of progress, such as the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit, where Jong-un met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The two leaders walked across the border together, a symbolic gesture that raised hopes for reconciliation. But these moments were often followed by setbacks, as North Korea resumed missile tests or made aggressive statements. The United States remained North Korea's most formidable adversary. Jong-un's relationship with President Donald Trump was unpredictable, marked by both fiery rhetoric and unprecedented diplomacy. Their meetings, including the Singapore summit and a later meeting in Vietnam, were historic but yielded little concrete progress. Jong-un was willing to engage in dialogue, but he was unwilling to give up his nuclear weapons, the very thing the U.S. demanded. "They want us to surrender our strength," he told his advisors, "but strength is all we have." The shadow of illness. As the pressures of leadership mounted, Jong-un's health began to decline. His lifestyle-rich food, little exercise, and constant stress took its toll. Reports of his health problems were kept secret, but rumors spread both inside and outside the country. Some speculated that he had heart issues or diabetes, while others suggested he had undergone surgeries to address his weight. His occasional disappearances from public view only fueled speculation. In 2020, Jong-un vanished for several weeks, sparking global headlines. Some believed he was gravely ill or even dead. When he finally reappeared, looking thinner and more subdued, the regime claimed he had been focused on state affairs. But the incident raised questions about the stability of his leadership. Who would succeed him if something happened? Jong-un had not publicly named a successor, and his children were too young to take over. The uncertainty added to the tension within the regime. Despite his health struggles, Jong-un remained determined to secure his legacy. He continued to invest in the military, unveiling new weapon systems and conducting missile tests. He also sought to modernize the economy, though progress was slow. In 2021, he admitted during a rare public speech that the country's economic plans had failed. A surprising moment of candor from a leader who rarely acknowledged shortcomings. "We must find a new path," he declared, though what that path would be remained unclear. A legacy in the making. As the years passed, Kim Jong-un's rule became a defining chapter in North Korea's history. He was a leader who embodied both the strengths and contradictions of his nation. On one hand, he was a ruthless dictator who used fear and repression to maintain control. On the other, he was a man who genuinely believed in the survival and sovereignty of his country, even if his methods were deeply flawed. To the outside world, Jong-un was often seen as a villain, a symbol of tyranny and oppression. But to many North Koreans, he was the only leader they had ever known, a figure who represented stability in an uncertain world. Whether he was loved or feared, there was no denying his impact. As he stood atop Mount Paektu, the sacred mountain revered by his family, Jong-un reflected on his journey. The wind howled around him, and the weight of his responsibilities felt heavier than ever. He thought of his father, his grandfather, and the generations of Kims who had come before him. They had built this nation, and now it was his duty to protect it, no matter the cost. "The mountain does not bow to the wind," he whispered to himself, repeating the words his father had taught him so long ago. And with that, he turned and walked back to the waiting car, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This extended story delves deeper into Kim Jong-un's leadership, his struggles, and the complexities of ruling a nation as isolated and enigmatic as North Korea. While it is a fictionalized account, it draws on real events and themes to create a compelling narrative. Let me know if you'd like to explore any specific aspect further.